hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel News Daily live stream. I'm your host, Sheila Gunn Reid, and I'm out here in my, news bunker in northeastern Alberta. And my friend Adam Sos looks like he's in a much more fun place. Adam, tell us where you are.
I'm at the Alberta Prosperity Project breakfast here, Stampede breakfast for those outside of Calgary. Most people will probably have a good idea that Stampede's going on. So yeah, it's a great event here. We're at Ranchman's in Calgary, historical sort of Western bar, all the way back to Cool Runnings and before. So a pretty historic landmark here. Glad to see they're open. I know they had some hardships and were basically shuttered from COVID for a little while there, but they're back at it. Stampede's in full swing. Lots of people here, lots of familiar face. Just ran into Chris Scott as well. So lots of folks behind me. We're a little ways away from the action. There's some country music from Lindsay Butler back there too. So we wanted to make sure you can hear us. But yeah, it's great to be here. We're munching some pancakes and enjoying ourselves.
Oh, your audio sounds fine. And I think for people who are outside of, well, I guess I think people on the prairies generally know what a Stampede pancake breakfast is, but literally during all of Stampede week, you can just walk the streets and eat breakfast. There's no such thing as eating breakfast at home. There are free breakfasts everywhere. Politicians, businesses, oil companies, political organizations, just everybody has a pancake breakfast.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's
now,
like so alive. Sorry, go ahead. Let's get into the nitty gritty.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say it's so incredible because like often you see it, like whether it be Milk River Coots in Ottawa with the freedom protests, all of that good stuff. All these sort of like socialist ideals of people coming together and taking care of each other, they never really work out. But then you have these ultra conservative, either whether it be like a blockade or a Stampede breakfast, and everyone's just coming out and eating for free and taking care of each other. It's pretty incredible. So yeah, it's one of the big ups, one of the big plus sides from Stampede for sure.
You know, that's it's interesting because that was one thing I noticed during the convoy and the Coots blockade was, you know, these things that the left say they want people to come together and share and everything. So just sort of this radical egalitarianism or whatever. But conservatives actually sort of want those things too. We just don't think the government needs to be involved. And so that's really the difference. You know, when conservatives are left alone, we form a community wherein we take care of our neighbors. We don't think the government needs to tell us to take care of our neighbors, nor do we think the government needs to extract our income to take care of our neighbors. We'll do it on our own just fine.
Yep.
So we should get into just the housekeeping stuff, and then we'll get into the news of the day, or at least the news of the weekend, because we have some news from a pancake breakfast, fake news, and then real news. So this is the Rebel News Daily live stream. We are streaming on YouTube, but there may come a time where we have to cut the YouTube feed because YouTube is a censorship platform, and there are certain things we can't talk about over there, like election integrity. We cannot question the advice of a local public health officer for some reason. Apparently they're completely infallible, even though they change their opinions on everything as they go. But if we get into sort of that hot zone, instead of losing the YouTube channel, we'll cut the feed. But the good news is we're also streaming on Getter. We're also on Rumble and Odyssey. And the beauty of Rumble and Odyssey is that you can support the work that we do completely willingly. You can leave us a paid chat on Rumble. It's called a Rumble Rant. It's how you support us. It's how we keep the lights on. And we'll read it on air. And on Odyssey, it's called the Hyper Chat. And there are a couple different ways to do that. You can do it through their regular fiat currency or using their library cryptocurrency. If you're into that kind of thing, we'll take both. So send us those. It supports the work that we do, and it allows you to take the show in your own direction. We'll do our best to read those before we go off air, but we're going to talk about the news before. And one of the things that happened over the weekend is, well, if you got all your news from the mainstream media, and they remain terrible, that's the thing. If they want me to go away, they have to do a better job of telling the other side of the story, or at least presenting the facts as they find them. So if you got your news from the mainstream media, I think they had a very similar headline over on the Star. So on City News, Prime Minister mobbed by admirers at Stampede Pancake Breakfast, and you can see the porch pirate George Chahal or Cahal right there with him. I like this video that's further down in this Twitter video, because it looks like, okay, so George Chahal, I think I'm saying that right. He's the porch pirate. He's the guy who was captured on a Ring video doorbell snatching conservative lit drops from people's mailboxes. Look how he's just sort of holding his hands together there like he wants to snatch a pancake and stick it in his pocket. Such a weirdo. But anyway, so if you got your news from the mainstream media, it was just a love fest. But that is not the case. In reality, the Liberals had to hide basically the Trudeau's appearance. They announced it last minute, and then they sort of hid it away in a parking lot where it was very difficult for people to get access to him. And that's because, well, he's not going to get a warm Western reception from Calgarians. And somebody like Post Millennial got the video. Someone tells Trudeau, "You're a traitor." So they tried to hide him, but I mean, Calgarians are resilient and crafty people, and they somehow found a way to get near to him and yelled at him. So why don't we show that?
Great to see you here. Great to see so many people understand here. So many happy people here. I'm glad you're here with my son Xavier as well. I know you're lots of you out here with families as well. This is a moment to gather and to celebrate being able to gather once again. It's been great to see everyone in person.
I love that. They could try to hide him. They could try to control the photo ops, but still, you can't stop a Calgarian when he hates a Trudeau. Someone was out there just screaming.
Well, I mean, it's everywhere he goes. It's undeniable. Mocha's actually here with me now. He did the great tech setup, so appreciation to Mocha. But he was just looking through some of the headlines, and they all, like, universally, like, even outlets that are supposedly not owned by each other, they say Trudeau mobbed by admirers, like, over and over. The similar terminologies used, like, they're just lying. It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, we've seen this before. If Trudeau comes to town, he tends to visit George Chahal or Chahal, however you pronounce it. He tends to visit him and do something with him. But there are always these like narrow gate ticketed type events, or they hide them away and they only let certain families know. They bring their friends. They go out of their way to hide this. And for anyone who's concerned about this, media covering it, if you're not one of the sort of inside circle, they'll even put out a press thing saying there's only pooled media availability. And then they try and just keep it like, oh, here's the 30 people in Calgary who like this guy. But for the media, we know Justin Trudeau is going to do that. But for the media to be so complicit in it is absolutely ridiculous. I do know we're trying to work on getting the footage ourselves as well. Someone else went up and said, hey, can I get a selfie with the groper and the porch pirate? And they were hauled away by security. Per the text, for what I'm hearing, that he got the Dave Menzies treatment and was hauled away. So we're trying to get that footage out there to folks. But it seems anyone who wasn't mobbing him as a fan was hauled away and maybe even roughed up a little bit. So yeah, it's no love lost from Calgarians, because there wasn't any there to begin with. But yeah, it is really sick just to see the media lying like this so overtly. I guess that's what they do to, one, keep getting their handouts, and two, to be allowed access to these events that they try and go to their way to exclude everyone else from. It was a stark contrast to my experience at the Calgary Stampede among, I mean, at least some caliber of politicians who are willing to face media and answer questions. But yeah, shocking to see what's happening in this country.
You know, and you just think about the gall of it all. You know, the mainstream media knows that there are other normal citizens there who are also recording the event. Yeah. But they think they are so credible and so beloved and so esteemed that people like you and me and normal Canadians will disregard their lying eyes and their faulty ears to believe them, to believe their narrative. When you have video of somebody screaming at Justin Trudeau that he's a traitor, that you have video that this is throngs of admirers at Calgary Stampede events. This is Calgary. Naturally, the National Observer is a Tides affiliated fish wrap digital fish wrap from Vancouver. So what do they know? They don't have a reporter on the ground. They're just relying on the other things that the other bailout media are saying. But, you know, when you have video of people saying, traitor, traitor, and that's going viral, like people are dumping it on Twitter and going viral, but the media thinks that they are just so beloved by the normal people that they'll say, no, that couldn't possibly be true. We must believe this no-name bailout journalist instead. It's bizarre.
Well, I mean, the wild thing is, like, there is sort of a demographic out there, like what is it, 15% of voters who still support Trudeau, ridiculously low, anyways. But less than 15% of Canadians, I believe, now are still supporting Justin Trudeau. This guy can go to like a organized, supposedly pro-liberal Sikh event in Ontario, and they're all yelling boo at him. So, I mean, you can argue there's very successful politicians who are beloved. It's pretty easy to get one guy yelling at them or angry with them. But when we're talking about every event in every community, no matter where he goes, even Indigenous communities getting heckled, that's almost unprecedented as far as leadership in this country. In fact, it is entirely unprecedented, because even Justin's own father, in certain communities in the country, he was very beloved. Justin, that's not the case anymore. I don't think he's particularly popular everywhere. But what makes it additionally sick, this isn't some Ottawa lake country event where they're saying he was loved and by all and warmly welcomed. They're coming into the heart of conservative Western Canada, the Stampede cowboy lifestyle, and he puts on, talking about cultural appropriation, he puts on this cowboy outfit. It's another one of his ridiculous costumes. Not that the cowboy element is ridiculous, but him dressing up like that with everything he espouses, it's frankly kind of offensive. But I don't care. I want everyone to have fun. Come down to the Stampede, dress up in Western gear. Putting that aside for a minute, he comes in here and the media has the gall to say, oh yeah, he's loved everywhere, even in Stampede. It's just not the case. It's not reflective of reality. And I mean, I wish there was a couple of journalists outside of the independent media who are willing to really do some journalism. You know, there are times, I don't want to paint too broad a picture, where there are journalists who ask tough questions and tell those stories. But why is it that they're the rare exception or the outlier? And very often they end up not having jobs for being too difficult when all they're doing is actually showing the truth.
Yeah, and I just was poking around on the Calgary Skyview election results from last time, because I was wondering, is this a guy who benefited from the vote split between the Conservatives and the PPC? And he did not. Chahal, he won this fair and square. Jag Sahota was a Conservative incumbent who finished about 3,000 votes behind the Porch Pirate, but the PPC candidate got about 1,700. So I don't know.
Well, and the fact how many. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, at the same time, though, I think this is not the election of the Porch Pirate still has nothing to do with how much Justin Trudeau is beloved, but just how demoralizing Aaron O'Toole's leadership was.
Yeah, no, I think that what Chahal benefited from was the entitlement and that old conservatism that so many people criticized. They were basically like taking it for granted. It was kind of the Redford politics style of taking it for granted that they would win in certain areas. I think that was what happened there, because Jag, from what I hear, went into hiding basically and ran next to no campaign. Plus, what little mail out she did were probably stolen by somebody who was going around stealing stuff.
They're in George's fire pit.
yeah. So but I mean, I think the Conservatives, I think they suffered from a little bit of entitlement and maybe putting a little bit of an effort into campaign. Clearly, some votes, you weren't losing Liberal voters to the PPC. So some of the votes went there, but other people were just like, for lack of feeling wanted, for lack of action on a campaign, all of that stuff. They lost that. But I mean, I don't think that was one that was won overtly so much as it was lost and surrendered by someone who figured they'd just get their seat back.
Now, let's move over to some of the Conservative pancake breakfast. Yeah. For all of Jason Kenney's flaws and warts, and I think I've reported them all, he actually didn't face the same sort of traitor business from supporters or people attending his pancake breakfast. I think people are just like, okay, he's going, let's move on. Why browbeat him? I think there's some of that. Maybe we have audio of this, but look, like it's normal. I wish he could have been like this all along. He's not wearing gloves, flipping pancakes. The health inspectors will get you, Jason Kenney. Where are the health inspectors? Too busy testifying in court against churches. That's where they are.
You know, it's the contrast is absolutely just glaring. It's stark. Because you look at, I mean, I was at a Stampede breakfast on Saturday, and within 45 minutes, maybe an hour max, I spoke with Jason Kenney himself. Asked him 2 or 3 questions. The one question I asked him, the video will be out later today, was about people being concerned that he's affecting the leadership and holding on to power. But I do think, and I did say this, I think that a number of people are appreciative of the fact that he could have stayed on. And he said, I don't have enough of a... So he, I think in many people's eyes, he did the right thing on that front. The other thing that was interesting is right before I spoke with him, people came up and wanted to meet him, and they were business owners from out of the province. And he immediately started on a sales pitch about bringing business here. But I mean, I don't think those issues were in question. I think most people on, like we've mentioned, that business front were not upset with Jason Kenney. It was on this sort of the freedom front, the vaccine front, the mandates, all that stuff. But I have to say, it was at the last Stampede breakfast, maybe the one, just the last one, I suppose, at this point, where I asked about vaccine mandates, and that's the clip that made headlines right across the country, that got all the quotes right across, where he said there'll never be mandates. I don't know anything about this. It's not possible whatsoever. And that came back to bite him. It contributed significantly, I think, in the fact that he's not leader anymore.
Yeah, it took 1 year to destroy himself.
Despite that, I walk up, there was no media availability at the Stampede breakfast. He had his whole team in front of him, and I walked up and said, Mr. Kenney, a couple questions real quick. He said, just a moment, please. His team actually came and said, we're really busy. We'd like to reschedule. And I said, can we do 2 questions and then we'll be out of your hair? I'd rather just get it out of the way now. They said, absolutely, no problem. They brought him over even there was no media availability, despite what had happened just 1 year prior. Keep in mind, we also rolled up the Shame on Chandro truck at the barbecue last year. Despite all of that, despite the fact we were doing journalism and drawing attention to what they were doing, he came over, answered 3 questions, said thanks, and walked away. Whatever you can say about Jason Kenney, there's no comparing him to Justin Trudeau on that front. He came up, he faced the music, he spoke with me. I also had the opportunity, as I mentioned, a year after the Shame on Chandro truck rolled up, Tyler Shandro, I walked up to him, started talking to him, asked him a series of questions on other issues as well. He is working on a private sort of provincial policing force separate from the RCMP. But we got into the Tamara Leach arrest, talked about all that, him now acting as justice minister. I talked to Minister Jason Copping about the possibility of mandates returning moving forward. I also talked to him about ambulance shortages. He just stood there. As far as the UCP leadership moving forward, I spoke with Rebecca Schultz at length, Brian Jean, who jokingly ran away and then came back laughing and answered all the questions. Travis Taves was there as well. Rick McIver came and spoke with us. And then Jean Charest walked up to us as well. And he said, oh, hey, you again. He said, I think you've asked me just about as many questions as anybody because we keep seeing him day after day. And he spoke with us and gave us an interview.
Oh, I think we lost Adam's Skype feed there. He's coming back. I think Adam will be right back in a second. Yeah, he's frozen right now, apparently, according to Olivia in my ear. But those are the challenges of working on location, on scene. But he is making an excellent point about just how open the Conservatives are to talking to us at this point. I think a lot of that has to do with, that the Conservatives federally, they are not under the thumb of Aaron O'Toole, who had this iron grip on caucus and just this weird thing about talking to us. But I mean, it's just abnormal. Their voters want them to talk to us. And I think the UCP recognizes the role I think we played in Jason Kenney's resignation. And I don't mean to say that we were ever campaigning against him. I have no interest in that. But just through our constant exposure of the civil liberties infractions happening at the hands of the government, I think that was probably good for about 15% right off the top of Jason Kenney's campaign. And, you know, I think they are giving us some respect for that and for exposing that. And I think they don't want the same thing to happen to them. It's really easy. Just talk to us and answer our questions. And frankly, they're good questions. They're not gotcha questions. And if you answer them well, we are happy to show the world. The greatest example of this recently is Ezra asking Jean Charest a question at the debate. Ezra asked a good question. I'm not just saying that because he's my boss, but he asked a good question about censorship, and Jean Charest gave a good answer. And frankly, no one's more shocked than me, but here I am giving begrudging respect to the guy. And the moral of the story is, don't run away from good questions if you have a good answer.
And I don't know if you've got me
Maybe
back
we
there.
can show this. Yeah. We've got you back, but let's show this.
Okay.
Government has a role in identifying misinformation and disinformation and regulating it somehow. Do you believe that's something that the government should do, or do you think one man's fake news is another man's truth?
I don't know how you do that. That's a challenge. I don't know how you distinguish all the nuances and the shades of information to make a ruling or a decision. I don't know who makes that. So, we live in a world where we're just going to have to work hard to educate people to be as critical as they can and have a critical mind on the information they receive.
Quick follow-up. One of Trudeau's proposals with Minister Rodriguez would alter the algorithm for Facebook or Google to boost content that the government prefers. Could be Canadian content, could be qualified news organizations. I think the implication is it would suppress other things. How do you feel about that algorithm change proposed by the minister?
Well, I'm not sure what they're talking about, and I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't think they should be trying to engineer things that they don't understand or that they know what they're talking about.
See? Good questions, good answers. Yep. And I have to admit that he gave a good answer. When he says people have to have critical minds, I'm walking down the street holding hands with Jean Charest on that statement.
Well, it's actually really interesting when I spoke to Mrs. Charest. I know at first his wife, it almost seemed like she was like, it's always a tough question. And then we started talking, and the start of my question might have sounded rather confrontational because I was saying you're a former Liberal leader, a Quebecer. Lots of Albertans maybe, or at least the image out there would be that Albertans might think you're out of touch with Albertans' issues. You could see him starting to recoil a little bit. And then I said, but now you're working on this Alberta Accord. And we talked about how he, at least on paper, concretely, is one of the strongest advocates in the federal leadership anyways, for Alberta issues as far as a concrete plan in writing. And then he was like, and we talked about how it's not about where you're from or what your background is. And he went on a rant about how if there's a place in the world where people judge you based on your ideas, not where you're from, it's Alberta. So I mean, it's incredible. Even Tyler Shandro, as much as we've criticized him extensively and will continue to,
we billboard trucked that guy.
The billboard truck, at that breakfast, and they said we could stay, but the truck has to leave, or the driver will be charged. Like that was a year ago. I walked up and said, "Hey, can I talk to you about this?" This isn't sour grapes or hurt feelings. I'm like, "Hey, I think you're doing some good stuff on this provincial police initiative. Can we talk about that?" He goes, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're not mad at these people. I mean, maybe we're a little bit upset, but we're here to do journalism, hold politicians accountable. And if they're doing something good, we're gonna ask some questions about that and highlight that. If they're doing something bad, that's called journalism. It isn't petty favorite playing. It isn't like the paid and bought for media lying about Justin Trudeau because that's their guy. We may have personal preferences, but when it comes to our journalism, we don't have a guy. I was talking to someone recently and they said, well, what's going to happen when the Conservatives get in? Isn't it better when the NDP is in? No, because we just criticize politicians and do real journalism. We're not just going to be like, oh, yeah, exactly. Ask Jason Kenney. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, whatever, before all this started, we were criticizing him on other stuff as well when he wasn't quite getting it right.
Spending.
And then highlighting stuff that was going well. That's what journalism is supposed to do. And it's interesting. One of the other sentiments that we heard frequently last year at Stampede breakfasts, very often from the party loyalists who maybe aren't even that invested in political ideology, but are very much like lifelong conservative voters, they're like, well, how come you're criticizing them? We need you to support them so that they can win the next election. That's not our job. We're not their campaign team. We're journalists.
No.
We're supposed to hold them to account so that they do a better job. And politicians, when they enter that life, they should understand that they're going to be held to a high degree of scrutiny. That's our job as journalists.
Yeah, I don't care about conservative politicians. I care about advancing conservative ideas, because I think that is the best way for humanity to flourish, is under, you know, smaller government, personal liberty, personal responsibility. So I don't care about the person who's selling it. I don't have a vested interest in any of that. Before we move on, Pierre Poilievre has a video from the, let's show that. Olivia. Can we show Pierre Poilievre's pancake breakfast video, please? This is where she tells me she either can or cannot. And I don't know if she can or cannot. There she is.
Member of Parliament Jasraj Singh Hallan here with the one and only and the future Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre. And we're just so excited for him to be here along with all of our colleagues. We're so excited that he's in Calgary Forest Lawn today, and we're able to give back to the community that's given us so much.
Jazz, is this the line for Passport Canada? I see the line goes way over here. Why are you making them wait for passports this long?
Believe it or not, this line is more efficient than the one under the Liberals.
Okay, so they're getting a pancake instead of a passport.
That's right.
Okay.
And there's amazing how excited all these people here are for the Conservative Party, UCP, and many of my other colleagues. We're officially getting pancakes out, and they're so excited to see you.
Right on. Well, I'm looking forward to flipping some pancakes and making it a
Amazing.
success. Great job out here. The great voice for the people in Marlborough and Calgary and Alberta and all of Canada.
That was Jasraj Singh Hallan, by the way, because I don't think he introduced himself there, but he's the MP for Calgary Forest Lawn. And as far as I know, he does not steal literature off people's doorsteps.
Yeah, no, so there's some action going on in the background. They're actually moving all the blockades around us, and they started doing that once we started. So just making sure I don't get nailed by something. But yeah, no, it's one of the things that's funny, and we talked a little bit about this on the stream for the federal leadership, but it's incredibly interesting. If you're looking at the availability of candidates, and don't get me wrong, Pierre Poilievre is out at stuff, but he skipped the CBC debate to go to a Brett Wilson party that was a little bit friendlier, and he's going to Stampede breakfast, and he's going to this, that, and the other thing. He skipped out on some scrums during debates. He skipped out on some opportunities where he knew he was going to get some tough questions. And one of the big concerns is sort of the lack of availability and the sort of entitlement that we have seen from conservatives in the past. Now, my experience on Saturday speaking to people was a stark contrast to that. It was very refreshing. Even some people I've asked very tough questions to, were Travis Taves, for example, was willing to just come right back at it and talk at length with me about issues. The fact that Pierre Poilievre is very hard to access, and I understand it's busy. He's a front runner. Strategically, he's trying to stay away from getting into a scandal. But do we really, I don't know. For me, it's a little bit of a concern, and I know other people have said that too, that the guy who may very well be the leader of this country moving forward is sort of strategically shying away. So many of the problems we've seen from politicians stems from strategically shying away to the point where they're not being held accountable by media.
Yeah, it's weird because he says, and he has a really great interview with Jordan Peterson about this, about his openness to independent media and how, you know, the government should not contaminate the media landscape with bailouts. And but in practice, you know, like, given the opportunity to show your support for independent media, I don't know. It's almost like he's still scared of the CBC. Yeah. Which, I mean, I don't know if I buy, because he chants defund the CBC, but it is weird. It's like, just weird.
And the weird thing about it is he's so bloody good on his feet. He's one of the more charismatic people. Like, is it really worth sort of cowering away to not risk a scandal? Or listen, and like I said the exact same thing on the stream last week, but take this opportunity to speak to issues and win people over. start your campaign for the leadership of this country, which he's been saying, I'm running to be prime minister. He's not talking about just the leadership, which I think is a good ambition. It should be the confidence that we're so much better than Justin Trudeau. Our ideas are better. We are going to win and defeat this joke of a prime minister that we have. But then don't hide away. Like, if you seem more to an extent like Justin Trudeau, attending small select events and dipping out for question periods, than Jean Charest, that's concerning to me. And I know ideologically, like, I'm far more inclined to agree with Pierre Poilievre than quite potentially Jean Charest, as well as just Trudeau, certainly. But that is just a concern that I think he has to address. His campaign did say next time he's in town, he will speak to me for an exclusive. Last time we were at the event in Calgary, it was just so busy. I'm going to reach out to them again, but if anyone from the campaign is watching this, just put this to a rest. Let me know where to meet. We'll sit down, we'll have a long chat, and this angle of inquiry will be dead in the water. But until that happens, we can't just ask you one question when we run up to you on the street. You have to make yourself available.
Well, and we're not going to ask ridiculous BS questions like the CBC. We're not, this is not gotcha questions. We're going to put the same style of question that we just put to Jean Charest to you. And don't you want the opportunity to do a better job than Jean Charest?
Well, and like, listen, some Albertans will hear the question I asked Jean Charest, hear his question, and be like, I haven't heard from Pierre for a while. That is a reality. Like, if you go into hiding, you may lose people. And I mean, you're polling your campaign team, your strategist may say it's not worth the risk. But I mean, I don't know, take a look in the mirror and determine for yourself. We've had a lot of maybe would have been good politicians. Jason Kenney, a primary example, who instead of maybe listening to their heart, instead of doing what they felt was right deep down, they were listening to their advisors and became a little myopic in their own little insulary bubble. Break free from that and be yourself, because I think for the first time in a long time, people are excited. And if we look at the crowds, people are excited about conservative politics in Canada majorly because of Pierre Poilievre, like on an unprecedented level in recent
In a way
memory.
I haven't seen in 20 years. Oh, in a way I have not seen in 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, they are excited in the way that swept Stephen Harper into power. That sort of joining the parties and reigniting the conservative movement and taking the reform and the old PCs and turning it into something new and getting new people in charge. That's what I'm witnessing right now. And it led to 10 years of good governance.
Yeah.
But the
Go ahead.
downfall of the most successful politicians in the country in recent memory, and I'm talking directly to Jason Kenney on this issue. The downfall of Jason Kenney, who was immensely successful, who healed the wounds of the PCs and the Wildrose, people who fundamentally didn't even want to be in the same room with each other. He was able to say to them, we've got a common cause here. We have to heal this division. We have to get back past it because it's important for the province. He was able to do that, but he blew himself up by listening to advisors over his own conscience. And here he is now having to resign.
Well, and I think just to herald the point of how successful he was so successful at unifying the party that there's no talk of separation or division, really. Don't get me wrong, there are independence parties, but within those people who are there at their core, to such an extent that Brian Jean and Danielle Smith are back in the conversation, and the party isn't like, no. They're like, no, we are unified, and you can come into the conversation for the leadership. That is largely in part. And I mean, we can talk about whether there was questionable voting practices during the leadership or whatever. That's another conversation altogether. But on a fundamental level, the United Conservative Party is more united than Alberta politicians on the Conservative side have been in quite some time, despite what has happened lately. And the party continues to grow in popularity despite the leadership floundering.
Yeah. I mean, even with, just a little over 50% showing support for Jason Kenney's leadership, it's not causing a wedge in the party. Yeah. At least not now. I think it would have gotten a lot worse if Jason Kenney had tried to hang on. I think then there would have been a party civil war. So at least wisely, he stepped down to salvage the party, so he didn't drive it into a civil war. But yeah, it's still really united. And Jason Kenney basically blew up what could have been a very successful career as Alberta Premier because he listened to his hangers-on and the people in his bubble instead of the things I think he knows in his heart.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
hopefully
that's
Pierre
exactly-
Poilievre does the same thing.
When I talk to politicians and ask them what they think his biggest mistake was, and Danielle Smith was one of the first people who said this, it was getting sort of trapped in your little bubble with your advisors and not addressing people broadly. But going back to the availability to answer questions, I know so many people, like we said, were like Danielle Smith, no way. I had the opportunity to do that extensive 30-minute interview and watch that again. I'm hitting her with every hard question that politicians don't want to answer, and she's answering them all. But how many people on that video commented? And Danielle has even said people have reached out to her specifically about that video who are now saying, well, maybe she's willing to come on camera, answer these tough questions for half an hour. You can win people over who are principally opposed. And I think that these politicians trending towards insulating themselves at the advice of their folks, Pierre Poilievre being among them. I know Scott Atchison even peeled out of the debates as everyone else stayed to sort of answer questions. That mentality of peeling out instead of being available, it's not going to be benefiting you in the long run. But people who are willing to step forward, listen, if you become the leader of the country, there's going to be a magnifying glass on you. If there is something you're trying to hide right now, people will find it, and that will be a scandal. Get it out of the way. Have the conversations. Be available. It's not the time for strategy leading up to this vote that's coming up in no time. It's not the time for that type of strategy, rather.
One thing I will say about Danielle Smith, she never shies away from questions about her past and how she blew up the Wild Rose Party. She never says, look, I've talked about it. Let's move past it. I've moved past it. She realizes that this is a question that she is going to have to answer forever, and people want to hear from her, that she regrets it, that she said it was the wrong thing to do, that it was basically a catastrophe. But she also says, I've learned from it. I admit that it was wrong. And that's something that's so rare in politics to see. Usually they're like, you know what, I gave a statement on this, let's just move on. She doesn't do any. You could ask her that question 20 times a day and she will answer it 20 times, which I think is to her credit because she realizes how bad that was. Now, we should move on, but
I just want to say quickly,
sorry, go ahead.
Compared to Justin Trudeau, though, the reason that contriteness is so popular is because Justin Trudeau has done a lot of horrible things, far worse than anything Danielle Smith ever did, and he's never said, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Politician, it's literally, if you screw up and apologize, it's like a credit to your campaign to be contrite. It's such a stark contrast, and I think that's why people are gravitating. She went from a probably not to a front runner really quickly because she was willing to admit that she's not perfect.
Well, and she was able to read the room too. Like she looked and said, okay, well, these are the reasons why people want Jason Kenney gone. How do I not capitalize? Capitalize is probably the wrong word, but what do I do to address those concerns that he didn't address? Like her suggested apology to her for the civil liberties infractions that happened under the leadership of Jason Kenney during the COVID lockdown. Anyway, we do have to get to the farmer protests, but before we do, let's throw to an ad. We've got an ad break here. I need one of those assume my gender shirts. 100%.
The female definition shirt. Does it come in men's?
Yeah.
Or woman? Yeah.
We should. Yeah. Mr. Understood. We should have.
Oh, I want a Mr. Understood shirt.
Yeah. You know what? That should be when you get your own show. If you ever have time, you should be Mr. Understood. But sorry, Olivia, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Can you bring up Adam's ad break that he filmed? Because I thought that was kind of fun. if you wouldn't mind. I realize I'm putting you on the spot here, but
we can throw to it in a bit and chat.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Adam's ad break is excellent. And, there's always advertising opportunities for people who want to advertise with the show here. There are a lot of people who watch our work across multiple different platforms. And if you are a company who thinks, boy, I think those Rebel News viewers might be sort of into my product or the thing that I'm working on, reach out to us. And maybe Olivia's dug that up by now. I'm not sure. You don't know the one I'm talking about?
Should we talk farmers a bit?
Okay, yeah,
it was
the one that was added into TGS this week. So maybe Efron can help you with that. Maybe we'll show that in a bit. Olivia's having a tough time digging it up because I put her on the spot there. But let's talk about the farmer protests in Holland, because this is coming to a farm near you if you're not paying attention. And that became pretty evident today. I'm losing track of the days in the Netherlands because we meet at, midnight or 2 a.m. Eastern, and then we meet again in the afternoon, sort of at the end of their day and the start of our day. But farmers were protesting at The Hague today. Now, the farmers are protesting all across the country because the government is bringing in these World Economic Forum nitrogen targets. And the nitrogen targets say that they will, the potential is there to be forced to relinquish land or slow production because they can't use fertilizer, nitrogen-based fertilizer, which is the fertilizer everybody uses. And they may have to cull animals by 30 to 40% because animals also contribute to nitrogen emissions. So carbon was bad, and now it's nitrogen is bad. And so not only is this going to hurt farmers, but it is also going to hurt consumers at the grocery store because you have less supply, which drives up the cost of things. And the reason they're focusing on Holland right now is because they are one of the world's largest agricultural exporters. So if you can get them to go along with it, it has a knock-on effect of normalizing this for other agricultural producing countries like Canada. And the sinister Canada implication came up today because the farmers went to The Hague because they are protesting CETA. Now, CETA, I just want to get it right because I was sending the guys notes on CETA. So we have Louis Brackpool and Katie Davis Court of Post Millennial there, and Lincoln J. And I think that team is perfectly poised to cover this because Louis is our World Economic Forum expert in this. These are World Economic Forum policies. And Lincoln is our blue collar uprising convoy expert. And Katie Davis Court is from Post Millennial, and she's sort of working adjacent together with the team while she's there. But the Dutch farmers went to The Hague today to protest CETA. Now, this is wise because CETA is the Liberals' free trade agreement, but it's anything but free. It's our agreement with the world or with the European Union. And what it does is it codifies gender nonsense, the feminism nonsense, and Paris climate targets into our trade agreements with the European Union. And so the farmers are saying, thanks for nothing, Canada. Thanks for nothing, EU, because now the government, we've signed on to this trade agreement saying we agree to put all of our exports through the gender-based analysis, which is madness, but also through the Paris Climate Accord targets. And so because we're an export nation and we are a signatory, that's why we have to put our agricultural exports through all of this. And we did this to them. But not only did we do this to them, we're a signatory. This could come to a farm near you in Canada right now.
Yeah, no, it's it's wild, it's shocking, and it's so interesting, this sort of juxtaposition. They are raising Canadian flags in protest in solidarity with the truckers in Canada who very much started this sort of movement, this sort of protest. So on one hand, you have the Canadian flag as this international symbol of freedom. It's absolutely incredible. It's part of the Canadian legacy. Obviously, the Netherlands, with some of the world wars, having a strong tradition of support and sort of amicability with Canadians. So that legacy is alive and well. And while they're blocking these roads and protesting, they're raising the Canadian flag. By juxtaposition, part of the reason for their protest is the action of these un-Canadian liberal politicians, Justin Trudeau at the forefront. Farmers work so hard, particularly in this day and age. The margins are razor thin. And for them, this isn't coming in, oh, we're going to slightly ameliorate, or we figured out a new technology to reduce water needs. No, this is like, your farm, it's gone. You've lost it. 30 to 40% margin. Imagine if you're a small business owner and basically 30% of your product is just gone. Your margins are gone. 30%. It is a death knell for these farmers. And it's just the latest. I mean, this effort that's largely spearheaded by these global shapers, these agents of the World Economic Forum, but ultimately an ideological push that in some ways has become alive in its own right, is destroying countries around the world. And people are saying enough is enough. People are starting to take a stand. And very often it is the down-to-earth working class people. They may not have the tanks, they may not have the armies, but guess what? They've got trucks, they've got tractors, and they aren't going to take it. And like we've said before, these folks can survive just fine. You saw it at Milk River Coots, these little utopias popped up and everyone was fed and taken care of. Even in freezing cold, these farmers can do just fine without you. And I've said this before, but you can't do just fine without them. So they are going to win in the long run. It's a question of whether the government causes a whole lot of people to suffer before eventually they yield and give in to these farmers.
Or if the government uses force on them, as only the government can do, right? Because the government has a monopoly on force. And so I know when I was talking to the guys today, they said that it feels as though something is going to happen because the government has no control over these farmers. And it's happening in places all over the country. It's entirely unpredictable, the blockades, where they'll happen, what's happening.
Yeah.
And it feels as though the government is going to just overreach. And, you know, it did take Justin Trudeau about 3 weeks before he did, but he did in a very brutal way. And we know they were already firing live rounds into the crowd in the early days of this protest. So that level of force has been used and a little bit normalized.
Yeah, and it's really sad to see that sort of, for all the talk out there about de-escalation, and very often they're talking about it when it's like a violent criminal with a history is killed. Oh, de-escalation. And then you have a peaceful law-abiding protest that sees crime decrease in communities, the opposite of these Portland occupied zones. They come in there with full force. They lie about people. They vilify. They share stories about violence. Everyone from Jason Kenney to the new Ottawa police chief, who they had to get rid of the old one because he wasn't willing to escalate and be violent. They are very much feeding into this rhetoric. We've seen people radicalized. Sadly, the police and police forces are radicalized. If there's a sober second thought among the police reigning orders, the higher ups, particularly the chiefs, they're shown the door really quickly. But these people think it's okay to fire upon these people. It's shocking, though, because you can see much more violent behavior, whether it be the TransLink pipeline there, where there was literally a violent machete attack. There was no massive enforcement and arrests taking place there. But heaven forbid some folks with a very reasonable perspective block off the roads. And this is why I want to drive this home. The reason that these people are being attacked is because what they're asking for is very reasonable. They're saying, leave us alone, stop destroying our livelihoods. They know that it's a message that will resonate with most people, and that's why they have to vilify them. We saw that in Canada, we saw that everywhere. I want to jump back a little bit, though, to our conversation at the start about the media, because the amount of people that I have talked to who aren't aware that anything's happening in the Netherlands, and then when you say, and they're waving Canadian flags, they say, why are they waving Canadian flags? They're completely disjointed from some of the most significant historical events in Europe, as well as certainly Canada, in the past 100 or so years, at least in the last 50 years. They've completely checked out, and the media is not covering this. And that's, again, because they are complicit and they don't want anyone to know that people are critical of Trudeau and his friends' policies, this radical environmentalism, these radical agendas. They can't stand that. So they're not shining any light on these vital stories.
Yeah, you know, it's like seeing the American flags being hoisted in Venezuela or in Hong Kong or in Cuba when the people there were rising up. It's a symbol of resistance and freedom. And now I think for the rest of the world, that Canadian flag is a symbol of resistance, a blue collar resistance, a resistance of useful people to the useless people. And it makes me really proud to see. I don't think a lot of people truly understand when they see their grocery store shelves. They don't understand the stress of an average farmer. We were just putting up hay this weekend, and even you get great weather, but even great weather is uncooperative. We've had so much rain, as you know, Adam, in Alberta, that our hay crop it's like a chia pet. It's so tall and so dense, and we're rubbing our hands together thinking, okay, great, this is much better than last year. Yeah, last year was a dry disaster for hay.
Yeah.
But it's so what? We can't get on the field to take it off. And it rains every single night. So how you cut it and then it molds in the field. So then you run out and buy a hay conditioner, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, just so you can get your hay off this year and maybe make a dent in the hay conditioner you just bought. Like it's crazy. It is all the things that you have control of that the government is doing to you, and then you put the weather on top. It is not a job for the faint of heart or even people who want to even remotely make any money. No, I don't know why we do it.
The costs and margins are unbelievable. And like there might be a year if everything goes perfectly where you get like a 10, maybe 20% margin. And that can be quite a bit of money, but then years you save that money to survive the other years. If the government's just jumping in and eating away, even on a good year, that money you'd set aside, it's absolutely devastating. And the thing is that farmer is going to be able to keep a garden going and feed their family, but the person who's not going to have food at the end of the day is they're not going to give up the only family cow so you can eat. They're going to save it for themselves. You know what I mean? So that the ultimate, the cost at the end goes along to you. And it's crazy with supply chain issues, with food shortages, all this, to even be talking about this right now is absolutely it's beyond madness, because people are suffering and people are going to starve. They should be talking about increasing yields, advancing technologies, not placing artificial limiters on this. And I mean, the other thing too is incorporating this gender nonsense. Like, what are they going to do? Make sure it's not just female cows giving milk? Like, what are they talking about? It's absolutely ridiculous. I'll go down to Stampede and see what I can get. Listen, there's no basis to this other than making things cost more, making people more dependent on the government, attacking farmers on a fundamental level. And then you have this, I think it's $28 million, all of which coming from the government for these bloody cricket farms that are going to give you pesticides. Right. Nobody wants this. We need to stop giving the government so much money in taxes. We need to stop the government's capacity to print money and just spend it on this garbage that absolutely nobody wants. We just need to be left alone.
Well, and I think I would be hard-pressed to find an industry that has made the advances in efficiency and emissions, lowering emissions targets, just because fuel's expensive, right? Like, you don't want to be out there burning it. But other than agriculture, I think maybe the oil sands, when they were making those big leaps forward, I hate to use that phrase, but they were able to bring their emissions down by about 30% as they were bringing the oil sands really into peak production. They came down about 30%. But I think you would be hard pressed to find a more energy efficient, considering the inputs and the requirements, than agriculture. There's zero till, there's rotational grazing, there's all kinds of things. Nobody wants to use more fertilizer than necessary. It's friggin' expensive. You're not out there just throwing fertilizer around. It's expensive. You don't waste it. So this idea that farmers are just cranking nitrogen onto their fields to increase their yields, they're using exactly the right amount and not a teaspoon more.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this is the thing, is it's like a self-regulating mechanism. Like the farmers are doing this as efficiently as they possibly can, because anything that they don't, it just comes back and it costs them. This is also something that we can talk about, and it's something I'm going to be talking about with as well, but I've been going to a bunch of rodeo lately. There's often talk about abuse, talk about treatment of animals. It's not in the sort of financial interest of these people. Like, often these animals are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, particularly in rodeo, and they're very much a member of their family. They're raised by these people, cared for by these people, and the criticisms that these industries face, whether it's farmers, whether it's rodeo riders, they're not based in reality whatsoever. Because even if the person was cruel and heartless and didn't care about their animal, didn't care about their stock, didn't care about doing the right thing, these things have proven to be economically beneficial. So it's just a non-starter from the get-go, most of those criticisms.
Yeah, make sure you talk to our chuck wagon friends when you're doing this animal welfare, because those horses are often retired racehorses. They're headed to the glue factory, and a cowboy comes and says, "No, I love you. You're going to pull my chuck wagon, and you're going to live the best life, and you're going to have better health care than Sheila, because you're going to see an acupuncturist. You're going to have a horse chiropractor. It's crazy." Oh, the barrel racing ladies. The things they do to their horses, it's crazy.
You're out there and you see there's 10 tough rancher cowboys, and there's like a little scratch on a horse, and they're all checking it out, and making sure the vet's going to be there. Like, scratches I wouldn't go to the doctor for. These people are extremely concerned about their animals, concerned about their livestock, and I've done a lot of coverage on this, and I'm going to continue to. We went to a bee apiary just the other day. That report will be coming soon. But you need to get out to a farm and see how these people interact with their animals, see how they work their crop, understand the hardship that goes into it. The sentiment of, why do we need farmers? I'm just going to go to the grocery store. It's a joke, but in people's minds, that is a reality. People actually believe that on some level. So you need to get out. If you're not in touch with this, you need to go to Glengarry Bison Ranch, to Chinook Honey Farm, go to one of the places that actually produces your stuff, and see how much they care about these animals. Every little bee matters to these folks, because that's their livelihoods. So it's incredible to see. Go check it out firsthand. Tons of opportunities. Come down to the Stampede, go to the agriculture area, go where they've got the animals, the livestock. Ignore the stuff about greenhouse emissions that nobody is reading, by the way, but talk to the actual ranchers about care for their animals. Talk to them about specific animals. Look at the animals. They're showing off. This is their pride and joy. So they're showing those off. So by all means, go check them out.
We should get to some of these chats. Olivia says that we need to wrap up right on the nose today, because somebody else needs the studio, and I'm sure you're probably getting sunburned, frankly.
I'm in we found a shady spot.
Good.
But yeah, we
had a moment of sun. So. Okay. Okay, so we got one from Fraser McBurney, who says, what would happen if the World Economic Forum said we will have to bring the population of Hamilton down to 1,000? Oh, bang, bang, the cops are breaking down my door. Yeah, because that's a genocidal, maniacal thing to say, but your politics are wrong, so you can't say it. But David Suzuki, he can say it. David Suzuki, with 5 kids, he can say there are too many people on the face of the earth. And he says it all the time. He can threaten to blow up pipelines. He can threaten to that there should be violence against oil and gas projects. And then those projects are literally attacked by machete-wielding maniacs just weeks later. His bank account is never frozen. He's never even questioned. But there's Tamara Leach still languishing in prison until at least Thursday, when we'll hear more about her future. Bizarre.
And the contrast there, literally, like, Pastor Arthur preached somewhere and didn't say do anything. He's being held for critical infrastructure. David Suzuki said to do this specific illegal thing, or at least I'm not surprised.
And then it happened.
And it happened and nothing. Yeah, it's shocking.
Yep. Adam Ottawa gives us $5, says, as a gay man, I find it eerie that I argue more with straight allies than other gays about drag grooming. I can't speak for all LGB folks, but from now on, I'm referring the progressive pride as TQ+. Adam did a great story on this. Yeah, I think that normal gay people who have strived forever to be accepted as normal, just people who walk their dogs and cut their grass like me. I think the madness of bringing little kids to these, I call them their grooming events, these drag grooming events, I think it hurts them. And I'm so happy that so many of them are speaking out. I'm just so glad to see it.
That Gays Against Groomers video, Jamie Michelle did such a good job check it out. Go to Rebel, check out that interview. I thought she did incredibly well on a very sort of contentious issue, to let people know that this extreme position is not representative of very many people in the gay community.
Yep, for sure. Also, before we move on, I forgot to throw to the URL, our special website for the coverage of the Dutch farmers, and it is farmerrebellion.com. You can see all of their work there. You can see their tweets throughout the day because they're live tweeting the things that they're seeing on the ground, and you can support their trip there. We sent Lincoln from Canada. We sent Katie from I'm not quite sure where she is from in the United States, but she's with Post Millennial and she's helping out our team there. And then Lewis from the UK. So they've got hotel expenses, although we keep her pretty low. There's no 5-star hotels for us here at Rebel News. I think it's a high 2.7-star hotel that we normally stay at. And the guys are renting a car to keep their transportation costs quite a bit lower, and they have to be able to be agile and move around because they don't know when the protests and convoys are breaking out. So if you want to see their work and support their work, it's farmerrebellion.com. And let's keep going. Adam Ottawa again gives us a buck and says, I coined a new phrase this weekend, turn that brown upside down. And a buck from Adam again says, I have a new term for these so-called non-binary people, anti-gender. Why not a new anti-label while we're at it? You know, that's a great point. And before I came on air, I was sort of listening in the background to Blair White, who is interviewing somebody who transitioned and then detransitioned, and the person was in tears because they felt like they were never really told the full consequences of what transition would mean, surgically speaking. And I feel so sorry for these people who were sold this great bag of lies. They're just another body on the altar of progressivism. It's so sad. Yeah. That being said, I think we're all caught up. Adam, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. You're doing a great job. Mocha, by the way, if you're listening, your tech solutions look fantastic.
Good
Adam's
job,
feed
Mocha.
was great. Visually great. Audio was excellent. Thanks to everybody in the office in Toronto who puts the show together for us. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thanks to everybody who pitched in a little bit of money to keep the lights on. I think I'm back tomorrow. With David Menzies. Sometimes my Tuesdays get a little bit gruesome and I can't, but I think I'm back tomorrow with David Menzies. And as my friend David Menzies always says, stay sane.
Hi everyone, just a quick update from me. I'm at the aftermath of the fire that broke out in this particular store called Picnic. And as you know, Picnic is a company that is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And there are speculations all out there suggesting so many different things. The truth of the matter is we don't actually know what caused the fire. Reports are saying, however, that it could be a battery. Because this grocery store, or this Picnic grocery store, uses electric vehicles to deliver groceries to citizens. So that is the current speculation. But I'm here at the scene and the devastation from the fire is unbelievable. But remember, go to farmerrebellion.com. It's very important you visit there. We are currently updating everyone on the news that is happening to do with the Dutch farmer protests here in the Netherlands. So please, farmerrebellion.com, visit there and keep yourselves updated.